Some of us, she said, her voice syrup smooth and cutting, are being overcompensated. I didn't even see the transition, just the click, the flicker on the projector, and then there it was. My name in bold white letters on a blue slide. My title, my salary, $350,000, centered and enlarged. The number hung in the air like a slap. Claire let the room breathe it in. Then she smiled, that tight PR-trained smirk of hers. That's 55% over market, she added, almost cheerfully. Silence first, then the first chuckle, Mark from finance trying not to choke on his coffee. A few nods followed. One of the interns murmured, "Damn." Someone coughed to hide a grin. I stood there, near the back wall, flat seltzer warming in my hand, hearing nothing but blood in my ears. Claire didn't look at the screen anymore. She looked straight at me. "Just putting things in perspective," she said, like it was a favor. If you're still listening, and any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, hit like and subscribe. Most people just listen in silence, but that one click tells the team these stories matter. I didn't move, didn't speak, just blinked once, slow. I heard the CFO clear his throat and mutter something about comp strategy alignment, and then the room shifted back to corporate rhythm. Next slide, next quarter forecast. But it didn't matter. She'd done what she came to do. On the way out, I dropped my plastic cup in the trash, badge still clipped to my jacket. The conference room door clicked shut behind me like a seal breaking. The next morning, I laid the badge on my desk, sent 2 emails, packed nothing. By noon, I was walking into a sunlit lobby across town, shaking hands with a firm I'd studied for months. I didn't smile, didn't pitch. I just said, "I built the client portfolio. You keep losing to them. I know why. I know where it's bleeding, and I know how to stop it." The head of strategy didn't blink. "We've been waiting for this meeting." I said nothing about Claire. Nothing about the slide, not yet, but I saw the moment it clicked for him, what it meant, who I was, and why I was there, not angry, not vengeful, I'm just done. Back at home that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the dining table alone. My wife didn't come home, probably stayed at her sister's again. I didn't ask. The laptop glowed against the dark wood grain. I opened a folder I hadn't touched in months, one I'd kept just in case. Contract renewals, site visit logs, missed SLAs, email chains where I cleaned up Claire's messes without ever getting credit. The truth wasn't hidden. It was just archived, like me. I clicked through them slowly, the documents lighting up like quiet matches in the dark. She thought she embarrassed me, but what she really did was set me free, and she had no idea how expensive that would be. I closed the laptop softly, then finally I smiled. The house was still, just the hum of the fridge and the faint tick of the hallway clock. I sat cross-legged on the floor of the guest room, the one we used as an office back when we still bothered calling it ours. My laptop rested on an old storage ottoman, and beside it, 3 manila folders, unmarked but familiar. I'd packed them away years ago, not because I'd forgotten them, but because I knew they'd matter someday. Claire just gave me the date. Inside, flight receipts, scanned NDAs, screenshots of renewal chains she never followed up on, and service logs I'd rebuilt from memory after one of her bright ideas nearly killed a multi-million-dollar implementation. One contract was annotated in red ink, her edits, her revisions, and the errors that would have cost the company if I hadn't stepped in and renegotiated on site. She never mentioned that on her slide. 12 clients, 12 I could name without even checking. I didn't manage them. I rescued them. I remembered hotel lobbies, emergency whiteboard sessions, late-night calls with their legal teams. I remembered what it felt like to fix something broken with no spotlight and no thanks. Claire? She remembered the metrics, not the mess. And now she thought she'd finally put me in my place with one polished deck and a smirk. I didn't yell. I documented. I opened my CRM archive. The access still worked. She hadn't revoked my credentials yet. A mistake. I downloaded everything, project notes, contract start and end dates, personal emails from their VPs, thanking me for my discretion, my persistence. She had no idea how many clients had my number saved in their phones, not as support, but as fixer. Then I pulled up the invoice log. It was all there. Growth curves, revenue delta before and after my interventions. Claire had inherited a clean system. She never asked who scrubbed it down. I dragged the data into a private folder titled Trailheads. Nothing more. Just enough. The thing about humiliation is, if you've been holding your breath for long enough, the moment someone cuts you loose, it doesn't feel like drowning. It feels like breathing again. She thought the slide was a finishing blow. But for me, it wasn't an ending. It was a lever, a perfectly timed trigger. Her mistake wasn't just underestimating my worth. It was publicizing it, making it visible, traceable. I checked the timestamps. Everything lined up. The delays, the deals she almost lost, the ones I salvaged, the quiet corrections I made without pushing back, because I thought eventually the work would speak for itself. It never did, but I was done waiting for someone else to listen. Now I had what mattered, the proof, and a quiet confidence that's colder than rage and heavier than pride. Downstairs, the neighbor's dog started barking. A car pulled into someone's driveway. Somewhere, life was moving normally, but not here, not anymore. I opened my email, drafted 3 short lines to someone I hadn't spoken to since last year's conference, a woman I respected, VP of Strategic Growth at a company Claire once called annoyingly stable. Subject, let me show you what I've been holding back. I didn't hit send yet. I just sat there, letting the moment settle. Claire thought she exposed me, but what she really did was cut the rope on the gate, and I was already walking through. The first time I noticed the shift, Claire had just returned from a board retreat in Sedona. She came back with a new title, a new haircut, and a new way of speaking, clipped, managerial, like she was practicing to sound decisive, but it wasn't the tone that tipped me off. It was the CC lines on the emails. Suddenly, I wasn't on them. Proposals I'd built line by line were sent out under her name. Decks I stayed late to polish were presented in meetings I wasn't even invited to. When I asked about one of them, just a casual check-in, she waved it off. Oh, I didn't realize you needed to be involved. It's more high level now. That was when I knew. Claire wasn't just angling for control, she was scrubbing the record. So I started preparing, not with complaints or confrontation, but with calendar blocks that said client research and workflow audit, even though I was using the time to talk to 2 firms. One was a direct competitor, the other, a vendor with ambitions of climbing upstream. I didn't pitch myself. I didn't sell. I listened. Let them talk first. Let them show their cards. Most people will, if you leave the silence long enough. The competitor had been circling for a while, testing the waters, floating lunch invites at conferences, asking careful questions over canapes and shrimp skewers. I'd kept them at arm's length until Claire's promotion. After that, I stopped saying no. We met at a small hotel bar downtown, where the lights were low and the staff knew when to stay quiet. The VP of strategy leaned in after 20 minutes. If you're seriously considering a move, she said, you could take half your book with you in a month. I sipped my water and said, I could do it in 17 days. She laughed, then stopped. You're not joking? No, I said. I'm just tired of watching people who've never closed a client use numbers like shields. At the second meeting with the vendor, I said less. Just watched their COO flip through printouts of our latest campaign stats misattributed to Claire's name. He raised an eyebrow and said, Interesting she'd call this her strategy. You handled the launch logistics, didn't you? I smiled faintly. Ask her about the forecast she took credit for last spring. That was all I needed to say. When I left the vendor's office, it was still bright out. I stopped at a coffee shop on the corner, ordered a cortado, and sat by the window for almost an hour, watching people walk by, watching myself, in a way. This version of me finally stepping out from under someone else's version of my story. Claire had spent months trying to reduce me to a number, and ironically, she made that number valuable, traceable, a talking point in rooms she wasn't invited into. Back at the office, she was holding daily stand-ups with the performance team, reviewing client churn and revenue growth like she had anything to do with either. I stopped going. No one questioned it. I'd spent too long trying to keep things smooth, presentable, intact, but that night I looked at my planner and crossed out the phrase, wait and see. There was nothing left to wait for. The plates were white porcelain. Cloth napkins folded the way her mother used to fold them, tight and upright like little sails. A candle flickered between us, lavender scented. The jazz playlist was low but deliberate. Coltrane, Miles, the kind of music you put on to imply everything is fine. Pasta, wine, 2 glasses, one untouched. She lit the candle just before sitting, like it was some kind of ritual. I watched the flame dance in the red of her wine. My fork stayed still. She smiled like it was any other Friday. I picked up that bottle you liked, the Syrah. I nodded once. No thank you. Just that. The pasta smelled like lemon and garlic, bright, clean. It tasted like nothing. We didn't talk about Claire. We didn't talk about the boardroom. Not right away. She asked how my day was, and I said, productive. She said something about the dog upstairs, scratching again, and the HOA ignoring her emails. I listened, not hearing any of it. My mind was still in that room with that screen, that slide, the silent laughter that stung more than anything spoken. I was watching a play I wasn't in anymore, and she was pretending the curtains hadn't even opened. It wasn't until the plates were nearly clean and the candle had burned halfway down that she finally asked, her voice light, "Are you okay with how things went yesterday?" I set my fork down. She weaponized a number, I said slowly, and underestimated the man behind it. She blinked, surprised by the tone. It wasn't meant like that. No? I looked at her. Public slide, laughter, silence. That wasn't meant? She was trying to make a point, she said, reaching for her wine. You're taking this too personally. I am, I said, nodding once. I've decided to. She didn't respond, just sat there, fingers wrapped around the glass but not lifting it. The silence between us stretched. I let it. It was the first time I didn't try to fill it, didn't smooth it over. Not for her, not for anyone. After dessert, store-bought tiramisu she didn't even bother to plate, I got up, walked into the hallway, and picked up my phone. I had one missed call from the recruiter. I dialed her back. Is the VP slot still open? I asked. She didn't hesitate. They'll clear their Monday for you. Do it. When I returned to the table, my wife was clearing the plates. She didn't look up. I didn't speak. We moved around each other like guests in a house neither of us felt at home in. Later that night, as I lay awake in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling and realized something colder than anger had settled in. Not betrayal, not grief, just the clarity of being done. She'd sat across from me and asked if I was okay with humiliation served cold, and I'd answered her the only way I knew how, with action. The pen was heavier than I expected. Chrome with a lacquered barrel, the kind you find in boutique offices trying to impress without shouting. It rested between my fingers like something ceremonial. The contract lay open on the table, initials marked, signature line waiting. Sunday afternoon, sun poured in through the tall windows of their downtown suite. No fluorescent buzz, no Claire, just air, light, and a silent understanding between professionals. Full autonomy, the legal counsel repeated, tapping the third clause. No hand-holding, no interference. And 4% on all portfolio growth tied to your transition. The strategy VP added, her voice steady. Retroactive to day one. I signed. They didn't need a pitch deck from me. They'd already done their due diligence, watched Claire fumble the annual forecast, lose 2 anchor clients, and credit her way out of the wreckage. What they needed wasn't charm, it was precision, access, the map I kept in my head for 6 years. After the ink dried, I slid over a printout. 19 names, no fluff, no titles, just account IDs and initials, the ones I'd built from scratch, some salvaged from the edge of cancellation, others nurtured through reorgs, tech failures, and budget freezes. I didn't call them mine out of ego. I called them mine because I remembered every conference room, every late-night escalation, every birthday I missed to keep their trust alive. Below the list, I attached a second sheet, not gossip, not narrative, just data. Missed service-level agreements, canceled quarterly business reviews, calls that were never returned, tickets closed without follow-up, product overpromises that cost clients real money, all of it tied, line by line, to Claire's decisions since she took over. The head of strategy read in silence. At the bottom, she exhaled, one of those slow, careful exhales that says, "We knew it was bad, but not this bad." She's been blaming client churn on macro pressure, the COO muttered. I nodded. The only pressure she felt was her own reflection. There was a pause. Then the strategy VP looked up and asked, "How fast do you think they'll move?" I didn't have to think. First 9, within 24 hours. The rest depends how long they pretend not to notice I'm gone. We left it there. They walked me out without ceremony, which I appreciated. I didn't want celebration. I wanted quiet, precision. That's how you dismantle something that was built on ego. Not with fire, but with calm disassembly. At home, I tucked the signed offer into the drawer beside my old badge. Then I opened my laptop, logged into my personal CRM, and sent 19 emails. Each one simple, professional, no bitterness, no bragging. Subject, new chapter, same commitment. I told them where I was. I told them I was still available. I reminded them who'd been on the plane when their rollout was falling apart, who'd stayed up past midnight to rewrite Claire's sloppy licensing clause, who'd made sure their escalation didn't become public. Every message ended the same way. If you're ever in need, I'm still just a call away, this time with more freedom. Then I closed the laptop. Claire thought she had the upper hand, but she'd never understood something basic. Respect isn't written on a paycheck. It's earned in silence, in presence, and in memory. And now I had theirs. At 9:13 a.m. it began, without ceremony, without noise. An automated notice landed in Claire's inbox. Client 047 had terminated their enterprise contract. No explanation. Just a standard clause invocation and a polite request for transition materials within 5 business days. By 10:06, another. By 11:42, 6. By noon, the 9th came through. All coordinated, all legal, all clean. From the outside, it looked like a market shuffle. Maybe a competitor, undercut pricing, maybe a new budget directive. Internally, it was panic, dressed up in spreadsheets. Claire called an emergency stand-up. Everyone joined. You could hear the tension in her breathing before she spoke. "We're aware of the client activity this morning," she began, trying for calm. "We're evaluating the situation. For now, all client-facing teams should maintain standard protocol and avoid speculation." Speculation had already arrived. The chat thread running beside the video call lit up with the kind of coded panic only corporate teams can manufacture. Any idea what triggered this? Someone mentioned a consulting shift. Is this related to Q2 delivery targets? I thought 047 was solid. What happened? Claire kept talking, but the trust was already gone. You could hear it in the way no one asked questions aloud. You could feel it in the silence after she said, "We remain committed to transparency," because everyone knew what they saw on Thursday. Everyone remembered the slide. My name, my number, the silence. They'd laughed, they'd nodded, but underneath some of them had flinched, not because they cared about me, but because they saw what she was willing to do when power shifted hands. And now those clients were leaving in batches, not loud, not angry, just walking out the side door. I wasn't on that call. I didn't need to be. I was already logged into my new dashboard, watching the same accounts light up green on the intake side, calls scheduled, legal drafts initiated. One by one, they were switching. Not because I begged, not because I sold, because when things went wrong, they remembered who picked up the phone at 1 a.m. And Claire was issuing statements, holding team meetings, calling it a coincidental churn spike, but inside the walls, the phrase took on a new life. Coincidental churn spike became a running joke, a term muttered behind closed doors, a quiet way of saying, "This isn't random, this is revolt." And still, I said nothing. I didn't call anyone at the company. I didn't leak anything. I didn't gloat. The damage didn't need my help. It was already moving on its own, and she had no idea how far it would go. By day 5, the bleeding was undeniable. 41 clients gone, not postponed, not paused, gone. Claire stood at the head of the long mahogany table, the company's executive board seated in a semicircle like a tribunal. She'd chosen a sharp navy blazer, hair pulled tight, makeup exact. It was the kind of look meant to project composure, but I'd seen that version of her before, the one that used polish to cover cracks. The first slide lit up. Client attrition, market volatility, color-coded graphs, bullet points about shifting industry trends, a line chart skewed to imply a rebound. She launched into her script. "We've seen abnormal turnover clustered among mid-tier clients, likely due to competitive price adjustments and general volatility across the sector. The chairman raised a hand. She stopped mid-sentence. He didn't raise his voice. Why did he leave? The room stilled. No one needed to ask who he was. Claire shifted slightly, clicked her remote nervously. There were compensation concerns, a misalignment with internal benchmarks, and he cut her off. Salary misalignment? A director leaned forward. Another cleared her throat. He didn't blink. You lost a senior strategist. Fine. Happens. But why did 41 clients follow? No answer. Claire opened her mouth, then closed it. She scanned the table, looking for support, but no one moved, not even her CFO. The room had turned cold. Then came the sound. A soft ping from one of the director's tablets. She glanced down, eyes narrowing, opened her email, scrolled, then froze. I'd like to share something, she said, holding the screen up just enough for others nearby to see. Claire stiffened. The director swiveled her screen toward the chairman. This came in from one of our terminated clients. No explanation, just this attached. It was a screenshot. My name, my title, my salary. Claire's voice still captioned at the bottom. That's 55% over market. Below the image, one line in the email. Disrespect breeds disaster. No reply thread, no commentary, just that. The air in the room changed. The projection screen was still showing her slide, but no one was looking at it anymore. Someone exhaled through their nose. Someone else quietly tapped their pen against the table. The chairman leaned back, steepling his fingers. Is this accurate? Claire hesitated. It was an internal moment taken out of context. It was broadcast on a company-wide call. I was making a point about compensation equity. You publicly disclosed a senior executive's private compensation without consent. She opened her mouth again, but no one was listening anymore. The board wasn't angry. They were calculating. Not emotion, exposure, not morality, liability. The illusion was cracking. Her numbers, her narrative, her curated image of command, all shrinking under the weight of her own slide. And for the first time in years, Claire didn't look in control. She looked small and alone. The moment legal stepped in, the entire building shifted. Not visibly, not loudly, but you could feel it. Conversations moved to hallways. Doors that used to stay open now clicked shut. Claire's calendar went dark, except for the word confidential blocked across hours at a time. 3 department heads were pulled into interviews. Not chats, interviews. The kind that start with, please confirm the date and time, and end with, you'll be asked to review your written statement for accuracy. They asked about the town hall, the deck, the slide, my name. They asked whether it was rehearsed, whether others saw the slide beforehand, whether it was shared internally, whether any consent had been given. It hadn't, because I wouldn't have. HR unearthed the raw town hall recording. Claire's voice, steady and smug. The laughter that followed. My salary figure, my title, my name, flashed on screen in front of over 200 employees. Not anonymized, not obfuscated, just hung there like bait. It was supposed to be a jab, a performance, a show of power, but it triggered something else entirely. The policy manual was clear, so was state law. Disclosing identifiable compensation data without consent wasn't just unethical, it was a violation. And the legal team wasn't interested in Claire's justification about transparency or culture shifts. They wanted timelines, email chains, confirmation of who had access to the slide deck prior to the meeting. They wanted names. Claire stopped walking the floor after that. Her door stayed closed. Her assistant started looking panicked, half whispering into her headset whenever anyone knocked. Meanwhile, her inbox was imploding. Not from me, I hadn't sent a single word, but from inside. Analysts, designers, account managers, people who'd worked under me or with me, people who remembered quiet guidance, quick fixes, cover I gave when deadlines slipped, people who watched Thursday's call and decided, if that's how they treat someone like her, I'm next. One by one, they left. Exit notices, internal transfers. In some cases, just silence followed by badge deactivation. Claire tried to hold on. She scheduled a follow-up Q&A. Only 12 people joined. Most kept their cameras off. Someone leaked a chat log to HR. She threw her own team under the bus. Another. If she stays, I'm gone next. The board was copied. The unraveling wasn't dramatic. It was administrative, processed, cold. What began as a moment of ego, a slide, a smirk, had become a legal liability and a culture crisis. And Claire, she hadn't just lost authority. She'd lost the room, not because someone yelled, because no one needed to. 17 days. That's how long it took for the polite veneer to finally crack. 17 days since the slide, since I walked out without yelling, since the first client disappeared, then the next, then dozens. 17 days of silence between my wife and me that felt less like space and more like distance calcified into routine. We still shared a home, but it was choreography now. Her brushing past me in the kitchen without looking up, my phone face down during dinner, messages unopened. But that night, she lit candles, set the table, chicken, roasted vegetables, a bottle of red we both used to save for good news. She tried for normal, asked if I wanted more pepper, asked about my new office, said she was proud I'd landed somewhere so fast. I nodded once, no real smile. Then she said it. Claire's under immense pressure. I didn't move. She's facing an investigation now, legal, HR. The board's still unsure if it was policy breach or just poor judgment, but her voice softened. She was just trying to lead boldly. You know how women in power. I put my fork down quietly. She humiliated me, I said, eyes still on the plate. She pulled up a number on a screen in front of 200 people. She turned my name into a punchline. That wasn't bold leadership. That was calculated malice. My wife started to speak, but I wasn't finished. She fired a signal to every client I ever managed that I was disposable. And now that it backfired, now that the consequences are circling back to her, I'm supposed to find room for empathy. She looked at me across the flickering candles, eyes searching for some version of the man who used to take the high road. I didn't offer it. I didn't destroy her. I didn't sabotage the company. I didn't leak one single word. All I did was leave. Silence. She reached for her wine, sipped, then set the glass down too hard. It tilted, but didn't spill. She's my sister, I nodded. And I'm your wife. The line sat there, colder than the food now congealing on the plates. She didn't speak again. Neither did I. We finished nothing, not the wine, not the conversation, not the meal. After a few minutes, she got up and cleared the table. I stayed seated, listening to the clink of dishes, the slow drip of a faucet in the sink, the quiet collapse of something we'd both stopped naming weeks ago. In the silence, I found clarity, not triumph, not bitterness, just the unmistakable recognition that some fractures don't scream when they break. They just go quiet, permanently. It was late spring when the report landed, an anonymous PDF forwarded from an ex-colleague with no subject line. I didn't open it right away. I'd already moved on quietly and cleanly, but something in the silence of that Friday evening, something in the light slanting across my new office window made me click. A familiar layout, corporate font, over-designed tables trying to distract from the raw facts, page after page of shareholder optimism, artificial recovery tone, and padded forward-looking statements. Then page 94. Buried between capital expenditure forecasts and projected international growth, one dry sentence in footnote formatting. 61% year-over-year decline in client revenue, attributed to leadership transition and market missteps. That was it. No mention of me, no mention of Claire, no mention of the slide, the call, the fallout. Her name had been scraped clean like old paint. The CEO section now listed someone else, a safe, forgettable man with a background in compliance and team restoration. Claire, it seemed, had vanished the same way most people like her do. Not with disgrace, but with a non-disclosure. Still, the damage lived in the footnote, 61%, a number too large to explain away, too quiet to headline. That's how corporate memory works. It buries the truth in font size 8 and calls it transition. I didn't feel vindicated, not exactly. What I felt was steadiness. Then my phone buzzed, a message from someone I hadn't heard from in months, a former analyst who'd once whispered thanks after I covered her client report when her father got sick. She didn't owe me anything, which is why the photo she sent hit differently. It was a boardroom screen, my new company's Q2 review. On it, a chart, My portfolio, accounts I'd rebuilt from scratch, relationships I hadn't burned, only redirected, value that had tripled in less than half a year. At the bottom of her text, one line, "Funny what respect retains." I sat with that for a long moment, not because I needed the praise, but because it was true. Claire had used a slide to reduce me. I had used silence to expand, not through revenge, through presence, through every call I answered, every contract I rescued, every name on that list of 19 that chose people over ego. I closed the report, powered down the screen. Outside, the city moved as it always had. People walking, horns in the distance, the low thrum of a train somewhere far off. And for the first time in months, I leaned back, eyes closed, and felt something I hadn't allowed myself in a long time. Not relief, but peace, the kind that comes when you've walked through fire, said nothing, and still came out carrying the light.